Welcome back to the Sens Spotlight Podcast, brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. And before we get started, bet the beauties with Betway and scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and download the app. Must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Betway is an official sponsor of your Ottawa Senators. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the hype button on YouTube. That also really helps out the show. And maybe one of the most gut-wrenching losses of the Senators season. I think it's up there with any of them. They did everything except they didn't get saves. And story of their season, better team. They're playing their arch rivals, the Montreal Canadiens. They're dominating them. It was shots were 30-12 and just no saves. And we'll get into what Jake Sanderson said and some of the reaction post-game, but we'll be once again with Pierre McGuire. So I think it'll be if Sens fans come vent with us today. So anyways, hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Send Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson, bursts of speed, gets a shot away, scores! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we are once again joined by Pierre McGuire. Just where do we start? I think it's pretty obvious. Goaltending, and what an untimely loss for the Senators last night.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially when you look at the schedule coming up. You got a 5:00 start on Sunday against Detroit. Then you go in to Columbus, who's playing really well right now. And obviously Rick Bowness would know the Senators really well, not just because he coached there eons ago, but his son not too long ago was the assistant GM there. So they'll have some intimate knowledge on that. And then obviously you go into Nashville before you come back and play a murderer's row on home ice before the Olympic break. So there's no wiggle room for this team now. I think that's part of the frustration that you alluded to before I came on, Alex, and it's great to visit with you again. But to me, there are a lot of the same things that affect this team. You see the first 2 goals from Montreal, power play goals. Mm-hmm. And one of them is just a tic-tac-toe. It's a beautiful play. It's in a dead spot in coverage in that diamond they love to play. And it's Slavkovsky who gets it, grips it, rips it, and goes high, glove side. There's not much Carolina can do that. I don't care who the goalie is on that one. Like there's nothing you can do. And then the Caulfield power play goal. I mean, Claude Giroux can't lose a battle there. He cannot lose a battle on the wall. And I think and most of the listeners, I'm a huge Claude Giroux fan. That tape from yesterday should not go on as all-time greats. No. Because it wasn't just that goal. It's the 4th goal when he loses a draw clean to Phil Deneau. I know Deneau's good. Trust me, so does Claude. But he's out there for a reason. You can't lose that draw clean, especially when Lane Hudson's on the back end. And then Lane gets it and rips it, and Suzuki, puts it in. So there's a lot of imperfection.
Yeah.
There's a lot of imperfection.
I still think, I think we should probably go straight to the Sanderson quote. I think
so too.
We're going to remember it. I was there. Julian McKenzie, my colleague, asked the question. And I think it was a rush of emotion. Just like Brady Tkachuk took 15 minutes before talking to us. I think that was to cool himself down. Tim Stützle, you could see it on his face. Travis Green as well, right? He said, I love the way we played minus the score, right? Everything kind of went in that kind of in that place. And I think you're right. I think the 5th goal was Levy's fault. The 3rd goal was Levy's fault. Mm-hmm. Probably in OT in a sense, the puck was right there for him to make that save. It goes
through him. It
goes through him, right? So it's not like a perfect, Caulfield snipe top shelf, or even the shot that the first goal he scored in the game, which I think was a pretty, tough play for Levy. But yeah, story of their season. And I think that's I always think about this with sports fandom and everything is what hurts the most and what is the most enjoyable. And I always think it always surrounds hope. And with this team right now, the worst part about it is that what's the hope, right? And you don't have your first round pick. There's no clear-cut goaltender that's going to come back. It seems like Allmark will travel on the trip. Maybe maybe that's the savior. Maybe it's Optimus Rhyme and James Reimer, who I actually think could be that to some degree. But at this moment, they need a Hamburglar run 2.0. Maybe not that dramatic, but in that vicinity. And it's just going to be a tough test. And it sucks because you watch the game and, you talked about the Giroux clearance. You talk about, I think, Shabbat on the last goal, the Anderson goal. There was a couple plays where Ottawa made, mistakes, but that happens in hockey. There weren't just complete meltdowns in plays and kind of in their own end all the time. Like the shots were 32-12. Like they played Montreal had 4 even strength shots through 2 periods. Like they played awesome. They win that game. I tweeted 9 times out of 10, and that was last night was the one when your goalie isn't good enough, right? And I think that's the frustration is with this core in this window to contend. They just needed decent goaltending, not even great.
Yeah,
and they have I think they had a stat before the Rangers game. I haven't looked at it last week, and Ottawa was basically one of the top or bottom 5 worst save percentages in the last 30 years. Just all-time terrible. And that's not all on Levy. He hasn't played all the season. Allmark played a lot, but I think a lot of people seem to have kind of their heads squared at Steve Stais, and I think that's a fair place to go in terms of didn't pick the right goaltenders, didn't insulate them. I think Marilyn maybe showed himself to be an NHL option, but not an NHL regular backup last year. And the fact that they didn't bring in, there was a bunch of guys, Alex Lyon, even James Reimer before, after they could have signed him in September, not in Christmas, right? And they never insulated that position, and it's probably going to cost them a season.
Well, it's still early, but again, no wiggle room going into this trip, 9-0. So it starts on Sunday at 5:00 in Detroit, and then it goes forward from there to Columbus and Nashville. They got to take care of that. But, it's little things with this team too. We've talked about it from the start of the year, and you've been kind enough to acknowledge that I brought it up. The truth of the matter is, if you weren't aware as a management team that the right side of your defense was deficient, you got an internal problem that you got to fix as a management group. Because I've been telling you since September that this is a problem. And it's a very apparent problem. It's a very apparent problem. That's number one. Number two, too many mistakes in the penalty kill. And they can say, well, we're getting better. The last 15 games we've done that. I don't care. That game's 2-0 because it's 2 power play goals against. Can't happen. Cannot happen, especially on home ice when more than half the building is awake for the visitors. They're not awake for the home
We'll get into
team.
that too. Yeah, but yeah.
But, so that's a second thing. And then a third thing is you can't keep making subtle mistakes, whether it's Dylan Cousins, whether it's Timmy Stützle, whether it's Claude Giroux. You can't turn pucks over at key spots in the ice. And they're as a group, they're all culpable, all of them. And this is something that's got to get coached out of them. You got to sense danger.
Yeah.
Claude knows, and I don't need to tell Claude. As a coach, I would just say, hey, we just need to set the example for these young guys in particular. You cannot lose that battle there on the boards. You cannot. Yeah. How many times have we said Dylan Cousins loses battles on the boards down low, below the hash marks? You can't, or turns pucks over. Can't be a high-risk player. You can't. You're not – listen, and it's not being rude to these guys. You're not Wayne Gretzky. You're not Mario Lemieux. You're not Sidney Crosby. You're not Connor McDavid. You're not Nathan McKinnon. I'm giving you the potpourri of great players that can afford to take chances like that. Most players cannot. And that's got to get coached out of them. And it hasn't been yet. And I'm not taking a run at the coaches, but it's just food for thought for them going forward. And then the final thing, and you've been so good on this for so long, Alex, the goaltending just needs to be consistent. It doesn't have to be great. Just be reliable. Make the saves you're supposed to make. Like the Anderson goal last night, that puck has to be stopped. It's a routine play. Montembeault at the beginning of the year, I do this show in Montreal with the great Tony Marinaro, and I'm just telling you, there were pucks that went in. I said, those are routine saves. Like, until he figures that out, he's got to go to the American League. Those are routine saves. And then finally, guess what Montreal does? They sent him down for a weekend in the American Hockey League to get re-energized and refocused and reconditioned in a league that's not as, difficult when it comes to pure gunners or great shooters. Yeah. At some point, Steve's going to have to make some hard decisions here.
Yeah. And I think, when we look back at this season, and hopefully I'm wrong, I was even, thinking about it when they were up 5-3 and that it looked like, okay, this is going to be an important, like a huge win. I see, the schedule's opening up for this week, everything like that. And I'm thinking to myself, if they make the playoffs and they get half decent saves, I think they can beat almost anyone in the Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. I don't think, and I think that's the gut-wrenching part about this team is they outshot Montreal 32 to.
It was 34-19.
Yeah, no, but at one point before Montreal scored.
Montreal only had 12 shots. I think it was 31-12 or something like that.
And they had given up 4 even-strength shots through 2 periods, which is like insane, right? Mm-hmm. And at 5-on-5, they, as we've alluded to, they have little mistakes, but even then, I don't think they had these like grave, kind of awful, like, what are you doing moments, at least last night.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, right? They limited Montreal mostly to the outside. Montreal wasn't buzzing. It was all Ottawa. Ottawa scored 5 goals. Like, they should win that game.
Race to 3 is what they say in the NHL. Win the race to 3, and chances are you're winning the game. Win the race to 3. And they won the race to 3, and they still didn't win the game.
Yeah. I think for Ottawa it's the race to 8. I don't know. It feels like that, right? It feels like every game the Senators need to outscore the other opponent, not beat the other opponent. And that's the issue, is because they don't trust that they're going to get that save. And, I think circling back to Sanderson, I wonder how that goes through the room. Like, Jake's a very likable guy, very affable, not a big personality per se. And obviously he probably has to maybe apologize to Levy, but it's not like he was wrong. Like,
I don't think it'll play poorly. I don't think it'll play poorly at all.
No,
I don't. And I'll tell you why, because these guys are pros. They get it. They've achieved something last year that most people didn't think they were ready to achieve. Jake's a huge part of it. He's an Olympian. He's a leader.
He had 4 points last night.
I know, 1 and 3. I'm aware. But the biggest thing with him is it's not about the points. It's the message that he sends with his play. Nobody plays more minutes than him. Nobody's more efficient than him on that team. And a lot of people say Brady Tkachuk's the best player on that team. He very well may be. But Jake Sanderson, in my eyes, is the best player on that team, in my eyes. He can't do what Brady does in terms of physically dominate people. But Brady can't do what he can do in terms of time on ice, in terms of defending, in terms of playing on the penalty kill, in terms of playing on the power play, in terms of playing in shutdown moments. If you got 1 goal lead, Brady Tkachuk's not the guy on the ice at the end of a game. He's not. He's just not, unless the coach plays a hunch. More times than not, it's going to be other guys. Jake's going to be on there. So I don't know. I don't think it plays that badly. I do think Jake, because of the type of person that he is, I believe probably either said something to Levy on the plane last night, or probably said, hey, when we got off the plane, can we have breakfast tomorrow?
Yeah.
Or sit together, whatever. Last night they probably got in, or this morning they got in way too late, obviously. Yeah. But I would say that knowing Jake, he'll take care of it the proper way, but I don't think it'll resonate poorly in the dressing room. I really don't.
No, but it's interesting just from my perspective, like a guy that isn't I love Jake Sanderson. He's great to me. I was talking to him yesterday about reality TV. Like, we get along.
He's in one. He's in reality.
Oh, maybe. TV. Yeah. It feels like this team is on, an episode of some reality show. Maybe the amazing race to last place in save percentage. I don't know, but it does feel like, with Sanderson himself, he played one of his best games of his career, and they found a way to lose, right? And I think that emotion plays, and I think he just said the quiet part out loud. And I, as a journalist, will never complain about that.
No, you shouldn't. So it takes me back to 1973. Montreal Canadiens are playing the Chicago Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup final. You can find it on YouTube or Google. Ken Dryden complained about the defenseman that played in front of him. This is during the Stanley Cup final. The goalie complains. And Toe Blake heard it. And Toe Blake, who was not the coach at the time, he was a senior advisor to the Montreal Canadiens hierarchy led by Sam Pollock, called Scotty Bowman aside and said, "You're going to have a problem tomorrow in Chicago." And Scotty goes, "Why is that?" He goes, "I heard what Dryden said to the media about his defenseman, and whether it's Guy Lapointe or Larry Robinson or Serge Savard, they're going to be mad at him." And so Scotty went to Toe and said, "Do you mind talking to Ken about it?" So Toe Blake actually talked to the late Ken Dryden about it. And then Ken, to his credit, when they got to Chicago, goes to the player and said, "Hey, I want to apologize. I was off base here. I should not have said what I said." And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And the rest is history. They go on to win the first of Bowman's many Stanley Cups in Montreal from 73 to 79. But my point is that was handled properly by people with veteran presence.
Mm-hmm.
Blake, as a player and a coach, was revered. He was a Hall of Famer. He was, older in his career at that point, but he still had the chutzpah to be able to go to Scotty and say something. So the entire organization, anybody that was part of it then, they learned a valuable lesson. It begs the question, how many people in the Ottawa Senators organization are even aware of that? Begs the question, how many people in the Ottawa Senators organization actually went to Jake Sanderson and presented it properly so that he could handle it a different way, away from the glare of the spotlight? Mm-hmm. And if they have people that can do that, then this thing will be totally covered off and it will be fine going forward. But if they don't, this will keep the wound open and it will be allowed to fester and it will cause problems internally. But I do think, knowing Jake as a human and knowing his father, I would say that this is probably going to get handled pretty well.
Yeah. And I always think, who says it, right? It's not even just what is said, but who. And there's not a lot of people, he's a pretty beloved guy, but he's also not kind of a big ego, big kind of force of nature that kind of, burns bridges. I mean, I'm not saying there's anyone on the team that's like that, I'm not insinuating that, but it's just he's a very low maintenance guy. It's not like he's, we've heard stories of NHLers kind of in different rooms, and we don't have to say who, just maybe some Vancouver guys, maybe. I don't know, but that's another story for another day. I didn't say anything. I think JT Miller plays on Team USA, right? I think so, and the Rangers captain. Anyways, back to the Sens. But I think it will be okay. But at the end of the day, that might be the quote of the Sens season. Because
for the Sens, it will be.
Right?
And it could actually, eventually, it could be a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Yeah.
But you can see the frustration. You see Timmy at the end of the game. Timmy comes up with a human highlight reel goal, which is spectacular. It is. It's spectacular.
Oh my God. I cackled in the press box. I was like, whoa.
You should have. It was a spectacular play. But watch his reaction at the end of the game after Cole Caulfield scores and the puck leaks through Levy. He destroys his stick right on the goalpost. It's not even he rips, he loses it pretty good. And he wouldn't be the only one. I would imagine there were a lot of guys. It takes me to a game that I did probably in 08, 09, right in there. I was doing a game in a city in a big playoff game, and the goalie was struggling. Big time. And it was a TV timeout. I was kind of quiet in the building. And the leader of the team looks right at the coach during the TV timeout, and he says, "Is this guy ever going to make a save? Because if he can't, we're never going to win." And the goalie was down at the end of the bench having a shot of water during the TV timeout. And I looked over, and he heard it. And eventually he responds, and it turns out to be a positive thing because they go on to have a lot of success. But I'll never forget that. I was like, whoa, that was full facial, in your face, better wake up kind of moment. Yeah. And the guy, to his credit, responded. But I didn't know which way that was going to go at that point. I had no idea.
And, it's funny, maybe we talk about the goalie graveyard in Ottawa. It was Matt
It's
Murray.
like Vancouver. Vancouver's been a goalie graveyard for a long time. Same thing in Ottawa.
Matt Murray, Jonas Corposalo, Cam Talbot, all the goalies they traded away or lost.
Yeah.
Gustafson, Decor, Ben Bishop, Robin Leonard. It's just like this.
Some of those, though, I think you would admit they were miscalculations by management. I don't think you could blame the players. Like, if people didn't know and I wasn't there, but if people internally didn't know about Cam Talbot's hip injuries and the problems he had, then that's on them. That's on Ottawa. That's not on the player.
But I mean, we don't need to relitigate Cam Talbot from 4 years ago, but his underlines weren't good.
No.
He was playing for a good team, and he had a good save percentage.
And people should have known that he had major hip problems, and it goes back to when he played in Minnesota. Trust me, I'm aware. And they should have known that, and they didn't. They tried to get Corposalo when I was there, and I said, no chance. Not happening. And I got fired, and the first thing they did is they brought in Corposalo. So some of this is management too. It's not just the last management team. It's before them. So, stuff happened. They made some miscalculations in the goaltending position. It's a little like Vancouver, to be totally fair.
Yeah.
Thatcher Demko's a really good goalie. He is. But he got major injury stuff.
Yeah.
And you go back and you look at those really good Vancouver teams, and I hate to relitigate history, but we'll just talk briefly. And you go look at how close they were to winning and how close they were to knocking out Detroit back then, when Detroit was just ungodly good. Like, they were crazy good. It was the goaltending that killed Vancouver. And it's the goaltending that's hurting Ottawa right now. And that's a fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I keep saying this. I'm sorry for the listeners if I keep repeating this, but I have to think. I'm like, how do I not write the same story every freaking day for Sportsnet? Because it's like goaltending, and then PK.
Yeah, I was going to say the PKs better be in there too.
No.
That's an issue.
But again, I think the PKs definitely struggled for sure. I think it's 100%. I thought they looked really bad to begin the year. I think they still have warts. Like last night, first two PKs, they weren't great. The last three, I thought they were actually really good on the PK.
Damage already done.
But the damage was already done. But my point being is, if they had really good goaltending, they're probably like 19th, which isn't good, but
it's better than where they are.
But it's better than where they are, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
I haven't checked it of late, but at one point they had the worst ever PK save percentage in modern recorded history.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think that's all in the PK. I don't think that's a full reflection of that.
No, but that's a good. See, I wasn't aware. I don't look at those. Are deep stats. That's good. But they're tactical issues with their penalty kill.
Yes, diamonds are not forever, guys. That's what I will say. I can't do it another time. I also find on that PK is that, like last night, they have a couple chances to clear it, and they always it feels like they don't clear it quickly enough and can almost concisely enough. And every time they don't clear it, like that Giroux play, back of the net, it feels like this season and as a whole, right? And like if you look at that, I think last night, to speak on the goaltending, it's not just lack of saves; it's the bad goals in the moments where you need a save. Anderson, they just tied the game. Ottawa's way back in it. They've grabbed all this momentum. Thud, right?
Yeah,
Montreal scores a goal kind of off nothing from Slavkovsky. Like they were dead in the tracks, and then a fluttering puck goes over Levy Merlainen, and then you kind of felt like you knew what the score would be at that point, right? And it's just
fair.
It just sucks. But I think maybe bigger picture, I'm curious from your vantage point. And I know some people at a certain point of this year had been kind of talking about Travis Green's coaching. And I think you can be critical about it. I think the PK is the number one. The rest, I think, is, maybe, here and there. But I think if the season goes on the way it's going on right now, I think a lot of the aim will go obviously to the goaltenders, but I think it will go to Steve Staios, right?
Yeah.
And the way Allmark comes back this next stretch is going to be interesting, because if he plays, let's say later this week, he's going on the road, so presumably he's probably playing one of the next 3 games. We'll see. If he looks like he was before the personal leave, I don't know if heads are going to roll, because I don't know if Michael Andlauer is ever going to fire Steve Stais, because they've been working together for a long time. But a lot of the heat is going to go onto management. And why did you trade for Linus Ullmark and give him that big extension? And why did you not address the backup goaltending and bring more insulated depth earlier in the season and in the offseason, for that matter?
There's a team down south, they play in the 201 area code, the New Jersey Devils. It's almost a microcosm of what's going on with the Ottawa Senators. And where did Travis Green come from? He came from the New Jersey Devils.
And Vancouver.
Yeah. The Vancouver part, I'll tell you what, I was there in the bubble with them. He was coaching well. Like, he coached well.
Oh,
Baumgartner was his assistant. I thought they were a very good staff. They did a lot with not as much as most people thought. And then Bruce Boudreau went in there, and then Rick Tocchet went in. But I think the goalie's an issue. It is an issue, and it's easy to beat up Levy. But I always say this: like, everybody blames a player. Like, when they see these guys getting huge contracts, who wouldn't sign those contracts? Anybody at home that's criticizing would definitely sign those contracts. I used to sit with Bob McKenzie at the desk at TSN, and we used to say, just one time, we want somebody to say, boy, that McKenzie and boy, that McGuire, they're overpaid. We just want one of those deals. That would be awesome. You know, we used to say that jokingly all the time. And so this is my point on that. At some point, it's easy to blame the players, but the real point is, how did the player get there, and who brought him there? Everybody that's been in player procurement has made a mistake. Every single, we all do. But if you continually make the same mistakes, there's a flaw in the procedure of how you procure players. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes you have too many yes men on your staff. You have too many guys that say, oh, yeah, boss, you're the smartest guy ever. You go do that. And that's how the same mistakes keep happening. It's the people that hire people that aren't afraid to have strong opinions. Those are the teams that usually do it. And I'll give you a case in point if you don't, not you, but people out there. If you don't believe me, go look at the array of management people that have been hired with the Florida Panthers. Okay? Paul Fenton would be one of them. He would have zero relationship with Billy Zito. None. He would know him from seeing him in rinks, but none. And trust me, Paul Fenton's a strong-minded guy. Like, he's got strong opinions. I have to think that everything's not always green-lighted in Florida. You know? So I'm just showing you, like, there's one example. And they've been in the final the last 3 years. Now, it's a tough go for them this year. But you see, I'll give you an example of that too. They get their clocks cleaned. They get their clocks cleaned in Carolina.
I can't lie. I love that, but continue.
They got whacked. I watched it, and they got whacked hard. They go into Washington last night. They win the game against a real urgent Washington Capitals team who is definitely one of their big rivals, and they whack back. They whacked Washington in Washington. And Washington's about to go on a big road trip. And that's not a good way for them to go on a road trip with a team that thought that they were going to take the next step. But my point is, there's a resolve and a resilience in how the team was built in Florida, because they're not all yes men. They're like, we're going to identify one core principle. And the one core principle they have when they built their team there is physical toughness. Physical toughness. That can't be quantified with numbers.
No.
And they make every shift a street fight when they're winning. And when they're not winning, it's because they don't do that. But when they're winning, every shift's a street fight.
You know, I'm a big basketball fan. You know, I love the NHL, love hockey. Yep. That was my number one love. But, you know, as a tall man, I kind of fell in love with basketball because of being unathletic. That's the only thing that kind of gives you an advantage in an athletic sport. But there's a GM. He's well-renowned. You probably know him, Pierre, but in terms of who he is Daryl Morey. He was in Houston. Now he's the head of the Philadelphia 76ers. And I think of this when I analyze sports, but also if I was like a GM or anything like that, who I'd want around me. And he talked about what he looked for in his staff. And he said It's people that had strong convictions that are loosely held. And I always love that because it's the idea is like, if you see the best argument for a player, great. And then things change, right? And then you move on to whatever the next best argument is, right? So for me, example, I thought Levi Marilyn would be the savior. I was wrong. I am completely wrong. But, okay, we knew that probably in October. So what do you do then? Now it's January, right? And I'm not saying that I would do better at the job than Steve Staios. My point being is that what this team needed to do was be proactive. And right now they're being reactive, right?
Well,
and they got James Reimer 2 months too late. And I'm not saying James Reimer is even the solution. I will say the analytics tell you that he's like an average goalie, which would be a godsend for this team right now. I don't think he's elite by no means. There's a reason why he wasn't signed. But anyways, we'll see how he probably plays later tonight in Detroit. But my point being is they had time to do this. It wouldn't have been expensive. This isn't like, oh my God, the Sens can't afford to get in a third goalie. They could have done it all offseason. And you look at the right side of defense. I think the Jacob Chikrin trade. Jensen was great for a year. He got hurt. That's not fully on Staios. At the same time, what did he do this offseason? He brought in Jordan Spence. I like him, third pairing guy, but he was never going to be a top 4 guy.
No.
Right? And so they never addressed that. They could have tried to, and they didn't. And you look at their draft picks. Logan Henser, I think, has been doing a bit better of late at Wisconsin, but he hasn't hit it out of the park.
They had a tough week. They had a tough weekend.
Same with Carter Yakimchuk, who's been hurt. I still think he's going to be a good player, but there's guys in that draft class that got drafted, after him that are playing in the NHL regularly already, right? And he's not. And he wasn't close to it. As much as they'll say that, I don't think he was close to playing in the NHL unless there was massive injuries. So all in all, like Staios' track record is becoming worse and worse by the day. I don't think it's an awful one. They made the playoffs last year. He got Allmark. It worked for 1 year. But, there was a lot of teams that didn't want to touch Allmark, and the Senators bit, and it worked for 1 year. But then as soon as the contract kicked in, it hasn't been. And maybe it will, right? The other thing that I think is interesting is the Sens are linked to a lot of Vancouver Canucks, from Elias Pettersson to Demko to Hronek. I guess just from your vantage point, like kind of bigger picture, like what do you do if you're Steve Staios right now with this team? Obviously, you have to address goaltending in some manner, but like what do you do right now?
I want to see, honestly, I'm going to see where I am after the game with Detroit. If you go into Detroit and win, you probably get a little bit more proactive because you think the runway's a little longer to try to get back in the race. If you lose and you lose badly, then I think you start to evaluate, how am I going to make this program better for the future? Because realistically, you're running out of racetrack, I think everybody knows. And now you're starting to see separation in the East in particular. Yeah. I always thought, and I know we talked about it, that there'd be, like last year, there'd be 5 teams from the Atlantic that would be in the playoffs and only 3 from the Metro. And it's sure looking like it's going to set up like that from last year as well. So, yeah.
We're in that. I mean, I think there's 7 points out now, right? It depends on who, but they have so many teams to surpass, and I think you could probably trade a Perron and Eller on expirings. I don't know about Giroux, but the other thing is you don't necessarily want to sell too much because you don't have your pick, so there's no real incentive to kind of, you might.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I want to identify, what do I have to prioritize to get better? And goaltending is one of the things you need to look at. I think we've talked about it ad nauseum. I apologize. Right defense is something you need, a stopper on the right side, and you need bigger, more physical. They're not that. It's easy to say, it's harder to do, but you can still do it. I mean, Joe Thornton was traded. Wayne Gretzky was traded. Glenn Anderson was traded. Mark Messier was. I mean, I can go down the line, chapter and verse. There have been a lot of good players that have been traded over time. It's just identifying how to do it, and this is the thing. I mean. I get it that teams have caps, and there's a cap for the entire league, but some teams have built-in caps just because ownership can't go as deep as everybody wants them to go, especially for the Canadian teams. People have to, and I know they do because they have to live their normal lives. but the currency exchange is unbelievably difficult for these Canadian teams. Unless you're Toronto, Edmonton, or Montreal, but Vancouver's got tons of empty seats now. Like, it's a beast. It's hard. That game last night for Vancouver, with the way that it's palpable out there right now, I mean, they didn't get beat. They got slaughtered on home ice. That's the wrong time for that to happen. And you talked about Elias Pettersson. Go look it up. He was -4 last night. So as much as you want to say he's on the market, you can't sell at a bargain basement price either if you're Vancouver, because you don't got a lot of assets. Go look at where Abbotsford is in the American Hockey League right now. They're second to last place in their division. So
would you do Pettersson for Cousins? Like,
oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. Nick Cousins. No, I'm kidding.
No,
Dylan Cousins. Dylan, yeah.
I know who you
I would do that too. I still think like they're probably pretty comparable players this year, but I still think you go high ceiling and just hope that it works out.
I agree with the high ceiling.
And like I think he's had a tough time in Vancouver. So
there's one other thing in Ottawa that makes it, and I apologize for cutting you off. I just didn't want to forget. Daniel Alfredson is part of the staff in Ottawa. And I can tell you, you can talk to most Swedes. I spent a lot of time there. Daniel's a revered person in their hockey community.
He is.
And so when a player, especially a Swedish-born player, comes to Ottawa, they're comfortable coming. And part of it is because Daniel's chosen to make his home there full time. Even though there was a divorce and he went to Detroit, part of that is what I'm talking about. Nick Lidstrom and Johan Franzen and Henrik Zetterberg, those guys put on a full court press of recruitment to get Daniel to go. It didn't work out for him athletically, but I can understand why he would have thought about doing it. He wanted to win the cup. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And things were, there was a bit of an acrimonious divorce at that point with the team. I get it. I kind of understand why there would have been.
I get why a certain person. Anyways,
but you understand what I'm talking about. So I think if you bring a player like I'm just using Pettersson as an example. The secret weapon that you have is Daniel.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
I mean, they're linked to Rasmus Anderson. I don't
think he's going to Ottawa.
No, I don't think.
I don't want to break and he's the right hand shot you could use.
I'm not. I don't. He's a better player than Nick Jensen, but I wouldn't sign a guy with injury history, big ticket. But I don't know. The Seth Jones thing from last year kind of has warped my brain on these things, where it's like a guy in a bad environment who's clearly skilled, and then you put him in a good environment. I trust that more. Like with the Pettersson, I know we've talked about it a bit off the air, but like I like Hronek. I don't think he's a perfect defenseman, but I would be sniffing at him. I think he's clearly an upgrade on Nick Jensen. I don't think that's
he is.
Yeah.
There's a lot to like there. There is. There's a lot to like on Hronek. I want everybody to understand. I don't have him as an everyday top four. But I do think he can play in that role. The one thing that when I watch him, and I've watched him for a long time, there's an inefficiency in his game at certain times where he's just good enough that he thinks he's really good.
Yeah.
And he makes a foible, whether it's a turnover, whether it's a bad positioning play, whether it's a gamble at the offensive blue line. So when I evaluate players, I look for guys that don't do those things.
Have that, yeah.
And so everybody's got their own way of looking at it. I just like the safer player. Doesn't mean that it's right either. Trust me, because sometimes safe players hurt you too.
Yeah.
But I just trust the safer player more in the top four than
it's like my career. I always think I'm better than I am, and then I have a terrible gaffe. So I can relate to Philip Hronek.
So, no, but you know what? I'm not going to say the player's name, but I coached them, and I really liked the person, and I thought the player was good. I didn't think he was great, and most people thought he was great. And I got in this big debate once in our office in the city where I was coaching at the time. And eventually the player got traded from our team, and he went on to have a very pedestrian rest of his career. And I got a letter, I don't know, probably a year or two later, and they're like, now the person that I was having this argument with.
Conversation with.
Yeah, argument was probably a better word, but yeah, conversation. He said, now I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now I see what you're talking about.
The one thing I do when I think, because you watch a lot of film. You do, and we appreciate it on the show more than you know. But I always, when I think about like guys and different players, I always want to talk to the people there because they know them better than anyone else, right? And I've heard better things than not about Hronek. So that'd be the one guy where I think I'd like him. Just he also has term security. It's a big contract. It's not like you're gonna die with having $7 million on your books. But
he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's a good player. I just don't have him as an everyday top four.
Yeah, and I think what you talked about before, though, it's interesting. Is like people talk about the cap and internal cap. You can always find a way, right? Look at Matthew Tkachuk going. Talk about Florida. They're like, there's no way you can sign all of your free agents last summer. They did it. There's no way that you can get Brad Marchand to Florida. They did. I'm not saying they don't have advantages that Ottawa, doesn't have, for sure. It's not an even playing field. At the same time, you can make that happen, right? Look at last year. No one thought the Sens would trade Josh Norris to get Dylan Cousins. They did. It probably has worked out, unfortunately, because of Norris's injury history, although Buffalo's sniffing around a playoff spot. So maybe Buffalo will have the last laugh. I could see that too. But, you can make these trades. They're difficult. They're hard. But that's why Steve Staios gets paid, way more money than we do, right? Like, and he has to find a way. The one thing I would say is that I think that no matter what happens this year, I really think Travis Green kind of gets off the hook, and I think rightfully so. I don't think this season is, there's a couple foibles, PK, but I think it won't be about him. And I think the interesting thing is, how do you evaluate this team moving forward? Because it's one clear deficiency with a couple others, right? Right side, PK. But that's kind of hard when you feel like there's one thing holding you back, because there's always more than one thing, but it feels like one thing, right? And then how do you assess through that kind of abyss, right? But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is goaltending. We can harp on it all the time. We probably will a lot this year, but I just don't know what you do this offseason. If, let's say, they finish 5 points out of a playoff spot, they don't get their pick, or it's the 32nd pick. What do you do in the offseason? They have a bit of cap space. You have to go. Do you go try to completely redo your goaltending position, make big trades? Do you try to focus solely on the right side of defense? Goaltending is never really an obvious kind of way to go about it. Look at Brandon Bussey, who got waived and now is one of the best goalies in the league for Carolina, right? Like, there's not a rhyme or reason to it, unfortunately. Hopefully there's a rhyme or reason to it. But we'll see what happens. But is there anything before we kind of end this show that you kind of want to touch
I think
on?
we talked about it before, but you're just talking about how you acquire players. I think the next big wave of growth in the National Hockey League is going to be college free agents because of the CHL situation with college hockey, and a lot of the 18 and 19-year-old players from CHL that are really good are going to see what Gavin McKenna did, or Porter Martone did, or Jackson Stone did, and they're going to go play college hockey after their 18th or 19th birthday. And I think what's eventually going to happen is there's going to be a flood of drafted players that will not be signed by their NHL teams that drafted them. And because of that, it's going to lead to this explosion of college free agents who still have to sign under the rookie cap, the guys of the rookie cap. So that's actually really cheap labor that's older and more mature than an 18 or 19-year-old. And they can come in and play. Now, they can't all play in top 6 roles or top 4 roles, but they can play. And those are those players that you accumulate. And if you're smart about how you do it, it doesn't cost you a lot of money as a staff. And a team like Ottawa that is a budget team, they don't just write checks. They're a budget team. Excuse me. It matters to have something like that as a resource going forward. I don't know how aggressive they're going to be at that. I just don't know. But, I've talked to enough NHL people that have called to say, what's your vision on this or this or this? And I think that's one of the next big growth potential situations for teams.
Well, I hope they do well in that area because they'll need it with their lack of draft capital. Like it is an area that it's all about those fine margins, right? Finding players. And, I think the past month or so I've been relitigating. I've said that word twice today, so I need to stop. The last 5 years of drafts for the Sens. And obviously they didn't have their first round pick for a couple of years, but from the Boucher pick, from misses in the second round to the last 2 years where I think they've had really bad. They've had some, we'll see about a couple guys, but it doesn't look like they're hitting it out of the park or even close to that. And, drafting's a hard thing. I'm not trying to say it isn't, but that's for the Senators an area they have to be very good at because they don't have all the advantages of low taxes and weather and climate, right? And money for that matter, right? Budgetary, as you mentioned too at the beginning. So we'll see. I still think they have a good core of a team. I don't think they're a bad team. And
they do have a good core.
And in another world where Ottawa, gets saves, which, maybe be another altered universe, apparently, for the last decade in Ottawa, I think they probably are, like a playoff team and maybe even one of the best teams in the league because every analytic tells you they are top 5 in almost every metric. I check every day and it's like in the same place. And I'm not saying they're necessarily a top 5 team with decent goaltending, but I think they're closer to that than, in the bottom 10 of the league.
Yeah, I'm really pumped to watch their game with Detroit this afternoon. I know
if they win, I feel good. You have 708 points.
Feel good. That's a quick turnaround too. I don't know, how Customs played with them last night or not, getting out of Ottawa. But I have to think it was probably a slow roll to the airport, just knowing the traffic after a full game, game like that where the building's full and there are a lot of people making their drive from Montreal or regions nearby.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm encouraged. I'm excited to watch. I know there's a big football game on Sunday afternoon too between Houston and New England. So I'll have the split screen going. But
there you go. There you go.
So we're on tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. again.
Yeah, we are. So we'll do it. And Pierre, thanks so much for taking the time and
doing
this.
I love doing this with you. I love doing this with you, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for joining our venting/therapy Sens session. Thanks, guys.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.